Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cicchetti.
Be sure to check out the Green Building Matters community, where you can have unlimited exam prep for any of the professional credential exams you're tackling next, as well as putting your continuing education on autopilot, saving time with GBS reporting your hours on your behalf. Check it out, gbes.com/join. Now, enjoy this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. We're over 100 episodes now, and I just want to say thank you for all the listeners. And we've got another green building professional with us today, a LEED fellow, a recently minted LEED fellow, Dr. Diego Ibarra, coming to us from Chile. Diego, how you doing today?
Good, Charlie. Thank you. Thank you for the time, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, I've been wanting to have you on here for a little while, and just to talk about what sustainability is like in your region, how far you go with some of the work you do. I know you've lived in the States, you've gone to school in the States. And so I think that's where I want to start, though. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And then, we got to talk about some of your advanced degrees as well. But where'd you grow up and go to school initially?
So I was born and raised here in Chile, until I did high school, and then did some architecture and architectural engineering here in Chile, and then in Spain, bioclimatic design in Madrid, before returning to Chile for just, a little over a year. And then I went to the U.S.
Gotcha. And then, did you know you wanted to go on and get a master's? Was that always in the plan, or did that come a little later?
Well, that's actually a very good question. Again, Chile, the end of South America, I was a very ambitious kid, and I always wanted to, go to study in the U.S., kind of like you always look at what are the best universities in the world. And you're thinking, well, from Chile, right? Doesn't matter that you think you are in the best university in the country. A whole different story is getting into one of those best universities in the world for kind of like a master's degree or a PhD even. So I basically crafted my detailed plan of, excel in school if you wish, but also work with the right professors and with the right people that could be mentors or sponsors to then try to apply for a scholarship. A Fulbright scholarship has the prestige to try to get you into one of those universities. And then I did okay, but how would I get the Fulbright? I need even more resume. So then I decided to work with a professor that had relationships with Madrid, with Spain, in the Alcalá de Henares and Politécnica of Madrid. So I said, okay, I work with this professor. He gets me into one of the Spanish universities. I do a good job at postgraduate studies over there. Come back to Chile, demonstrate that I'm contributing at a very high level, apply to the Fulbright, and with that in my hand, of course, I have a chance to go to a Harvard, MIT, UC Berkeley, and so on. So basically, I knew, to your question, very early on that I wanted to pursue advanced degrees, if you wish, in some of the best universities in the world. But it was not easy, right? I had to create my plan. It took me a few years to get all the cards in the right place to make it happen.
Wow. You had a vision there even at a young age, and sounds like you're very resourceful. And for those listening, he's being humble. He couldn't decide, so he went to both Harvard and MIT. So before we get to that, tell me a little bit about how'd you know at what point I'm going to do something with sustainability? Because, I see your master's from Harvard in environmental technologies. Was it then? Was it more when you were younger? How'd you know sustainability is something you might want to make a career out of?
So I don't have that. That didn't happen a specific kind of like aha moment, to be honest. Growing up in Chile, you can imagine, for those that are not familiar, very narrow country between the Andes, 20,000 feet high mountains and the ocean, right? So we have crazy landscapes, amazing mountaineering and trekking and so on. So I was very much an outdoorsy person growing up. And at the same time, I knew that I wanted to I liked everything that was the intersection between technology, construction, and kind of business. And so when I started architecture or architectural engineering, that's where I went to all structures, construction management. That was kind of originally my focus. And then it was not until I went to Spain for studying bioclimatic design, and I had the chance to basically participate in the Spanish expert committee for the implementation of the European Commission directive on energy labelings of buildings, or energy efficiency in buildings, actually. I really saw the power or the impact that we could have moving the built environment, the building sector, towards sustainability. And that basically was a kind of a click of merging two passions, right? Outdoors and nature with the whole technology business side of buildings and the built infrastructure.
Sure. And I've got to ask, because, I got my degree from Georgia Tech, and I was around construction, though. My dad was a journeyman carpenter. My grandfather was an engineer in New York City, even on the Holland Tunnel. So, and I grew up in a small town in the mountains, so I appreciated the environment and the outdoors. But did you have any of that influence? Like, how'd you know buildings, for example, how'd you know not, say, traditional architecture, but this? Did you have any mentors along the way?
So that's another good question. I think of that question maybe in two ways. One is I did have a mentor on pursuing kind of like your passion, have a plan, make it happen, and take the risks of building a business. In my case as well, and that was from my dad. My dad and my mom, they were both engineers. And my dad always had a business, so I was kind of like not risk averse from the startup mentality in a way. And they had moved to the US for, early on for a little over a year to study as well. So they really encouraged me to pursue that was an option. You got to work hard, but you can do it. And then more from a sustainability or content perspective and navigate, how to really become an expert. I think Christoph Reinhardt, Dr. Reinhardt, that he was I worked like around 8 years with him. He was my advisor in my master's degree and my PhD degree. He was at Harvard when I first arrived, or he arrived with me at the same time, the director of the Energy and Environment or the Environmental Technologies program at Harvard. And then he moved to MIT now is the head of the Building Technology program at MIT. And then I had the chance to work with him at MIT as well. So he was, pivotal in understanding where's the future of green buildings going from a more, scientific, I would say, more professional content point of view.
Okay. No, that's really good.
He's such a nice, and by the way, he's such a nice guy, down to earth. Like, it's one of those persons that is a genius. Also, it's like talking to a friend, like approachable. It's incredible.
Well, I can already tell you're pretty humble and approachable here. So walk us through, okay, you're in Boston and you're going through, Harvard Masters and you got the cross enrollment at MIT, but then you just decided to stick around for some more education, or what was that next decision like to go for your doctorate?
Yeah, so honestly, that's a lot to do with again the influence of Christoph and another of my fellow classmates or colleagues. The Harvard MIT relationship, as you know, they're like both in Cambridge, maybe 15 blocks away. You can take MBA classes, engineering, BT, and so on. And there's so much to learn, and everybody's so driven and intellectual that if you're in the learning mode, it's the place to be in the world, if you ask me. Sure. So if you have the chance to stay and you're proving yourself that you can contribute to your field, I think when I had the opportunity to stay, it was like, I'm going to regret it. I'm going to regret it when I'm like 60 or 80 years old, or at this point, like 100 years old. What are the things you're going to regret in life? Perhaps getting that, that PhD degree, right? Or a doctorate degree.
Sure. It sounds like an amazing place. And you were there at a good time when sustainability and the green building movement were really growing. And so now you get these advanced degrees, you get out and you get to continue your career. Tell us a little bit about the next few places where you had some experience. What kind of work were you doing there after you left Harvard?
So that's also interesting. Before I went to Harvard, I already had started my consulting firm. I co-founded a consulting firm with Chilean German partners here in Chile, and we were doing projects in Chile, in Peru, and Colombia. And then when I was done with Harvard after many years of all that studying, I had the opportunity to join BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, as a management consultant in San Francisco, and that was really exciting. That was a point of you're leaving this environment where you've been learning so much, and now there's this opportunity to really implement all that knowledge at a different level in terms of strategy, serving, Fortune 500 companies and doing clean tech and utility transformations of the future. kind of a whole different scope of work that I was really intrigued. And although I was serving as as part of the energy and operations group, I was, of course, as a management consultant, you are doing anything, right? Like from technology or, healthcare or whatever strategy projects come your way. So I spent there a couple of years. That was really, really interesting. Got me to travel a lot. Of course, it's consulting, right? So you're on a plane Monday to Thursday every week. Yeah. And after that, I returned to Chile and returned to our business and kept growing it again for a couple of years. And now I recently actually joined ENGIE Impact as a managing director for their LATAM operations. And that has been incredibly exciting, super busy. Happy to tell you more about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, because along the way, like you said, clean tech, clean energy, some lead consulting in there, some life cycle work, supply chain. Fast forward to today. And, we do have a lot of international listeners, but for those not as familiar with ENGIE, obviously very, very large company, right? French power company that has tentacles in some different markets. Do I have that right? I mean, what's their role in Santiago where you're based?
Yeah, well, so ENGIE is a $70 billion company, right? French originally is the number one independent power producer in the world. The number one company globally, microgrids, and second in EV charging stations and so on. So it's massive, right? 150,000 people. And ENGIE Group has, created, of course, different business units, the different companies. And one of those is ENGIE Impact. And the role of Impact is really the merge, if you ask me, of a management consulting firm, so an MBB, what people call McKinsey, Bain, or BCG, sure. An energy company or an energy advising company. So it's right in the middle, right? You want to help clients basically navigate the sustainability transformation, right, towards a carbon-free economy. So you're basically helping the roadmap planning and assessing specific technologies, proving business cases. So it's super interesting because in a way you are leveraging the insights that you have because you're an energy company and you have access to all this, crazy amount of professionals, but you're also really trying to think strategically on how you help clients, again, scale up at speed towards a more sustainable or business model or, again, a decarbonization of the operation.
Yeah, no, I can tell you're stoked about this new opportunity for you and just, having the resources there and the network. And gosh, you're going to be able to make some big change there with ENGIE Impact. So we'll look back on the career, personal and career. What stands out? What are you most proud of, Diego? Congrats on your lead fellow. What a distinguished mark there. So congrats. Talk about that. And what else stands out, though? What's on the highlight reel?
So I guess, one of the things I would say to it, I consider an achievement is always trying to make a bigger impact and finding a way of doing that, right? So, I spent many, many years at the building scale, right? At Greenbuilding from, energy modeling and the specifics of performance modeling and diving into algorithms and basically, trying to save the world one building at a time or one facade at a time even,
sure.
Right? But then, try to go to the next step of the consulting approach and now trying to do even bigger change with the resources of this other company, ENGIE and so on. So I think that's one of I consider a personal achievement, being able to, some people stay where you feel comfortable, right? You don't want to, you're an expert in this realm or in this scope of work. I'm going to stay here forever, right? Like I'm comfortable. And in my case, I've always been trying to push myself and try to think on the next big way of making an even bigger impact. So I think I would consider that not to be material on achieving a specific degree or a specific university or things like that. I think from a more life evolution point of view, I think that would be something I'm proud of.
No, thank you. That's really awesome. Talk about some projects. What are one or two that over your career really stand out? For various reasons. Like what comes to mind when I say, hey, what were some of your favorite projects you've worked on so far?
One of the favorites was a 13-story high, office building here in Santiago called Costanera Lion. It was, again, this is 2007, 2008. Lead is really just picking up, especially in Chile. There was not a single, perhaps there was one building already certified, but, most of them were just in the process, and Greenbuilding was something that not many people understood. But this architect and developer actually had been a classmate at Harvard and was back and was really convinced to push this real estate company on doing, kind of like a core shell development that really had some value from sustainability and the quality of the space point of view. And it was interesting because it was like, I felt like we clearly understood each other, understood the value of the process and the outcome, but we were having to prove to everybody else in the design team, shareholders, stakeholders, that it was the right thing to do, right? And we were basically doing way more analysis and trying to educate at the same time as we were doing deliverables and doing our own work. And so that was memorable memories. Yeah. Actually, that project a few years afterwards got a recognition from the World Green Building Council as one of the, the prize for the best new construction project in the world, I think, because it was in the World Green Building Council, the business case of green building. So it was selected to be the example of new constructions, and later on by the USDC and so on. So that was, the architect did a magnificent work with the architecture and using thermal mass and, providing an image and a valuable product to the market that it was not a glass box, right? It was the tendency at the time.
Wow. No, that's very exciting. And it's kind of those projects that first come to memory. I mean, those are, they don't have to be the biggest project or the flashiest. There was always something special about it. So, well, my next question, Diego, is I love to ask a green building expert like you is, if you had a crystal ball, what's around the corner in this green building movement, in this sustainability movement? What should we be reading up on now?
So I think perhaps I would say I see three key trends, right? More of at a building scale. One is the power of computing, right? And artificial intelligence, computer-aided design, that's going to take us to a whole new level. I think everything from, AI algorithms or evolutionary algorithms to do optimization of design or to doing, an existing building's fault detection and diagnostics, preventive maintenance, optimizing of operations and so on. So that's for new buildings as well as for existing buildings. That piece of technology is going to be one very interesting trend that is definitely going to start changing the way we design and we operate buildings. Then the second one would be about going a little beyond the building and the whole movement we see with wealth, right? So trying to focus on the health part of the building, the experience and the health of the occupant. I think that is going to keep taking force now that coronavirus, right? It's all about HEPA filters and adequate levels of ventilation, also filtration and almost resilience for this kind of
antimicrobial, surfaces, elevator buttons. I mean, it's all going to be a really hot topic when we come out of this crisis we're in right now. And so before you go to your third one, tell us about wellness in your area, if you don't mind. Sorry to interrupt this. Are some projects doing well or fit well, or are they just starting to say, okay, what is a healthy building? How is it going with wellness in your region?
So that is a good point because I think that from talking about the WELL standard or the role that LEED had in the beginning, at least in developing countries, right, in this region, all Latin America or South America, it's much easier to have standard or a study or a movement to reference to, right, that to try to start proving the value from scratch here, right? So I think when people start thinking about wellness, that question clearly comes up, like, but what is it, right? Like, what are the topics I should be looking at? What is the impact? Have other people have done it or not before, ahead of us? And that's, I think, the value of rating systems or international standards, that you have that information that somebody went through a group of experts and really thought about, how will you address wellness in a building? What are the key topics to address? What is good? What is beyond good? What is minimum? Those kind of things. So people are starting to think about that here in the region. We've tried to get a few building owners and corporations, to pursue well beyond just the feasibility analysis, but it's been tough, to be honest. As soon as you have to start getting engaged multiple stakeholders, not only design team members or operations, but also processes and human resources and so on and so forth, it becomes a little trickier. I would argue organizations that are not fully aligned yet to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point is, with well and fit well and even LEED in the early days, I always like to tell people, look, at least use these as the guidelines. Here's the best practices. Start implementing it. Now, if you want to go for the official plaque and the official third-party validation, hey, we did do it right, go for the certification. But at least for now, use it as the best practices and the guideline. So artificial intelligence, wellness, what else do you think's around the corner?
Yeah, well, so the next topic is the next scale, right? It's city scale and community scale planning. So I think, again, a lot driven by technology, digital twins, performance modeling of cities that are more accurate, including CFD, urban effects, walkability index, and things like that. Urban farming. Now we have the data, we have the capacity to analyze big data, to run the scenarios, to really, there's more and more experiences also to kind of calibrate the algorithms or your whatever models you're using to try to analyze these scenarios. So I think from climate change threats, as digital twins are pushing, European cities to really use digital twins for planning and maintenance of cities and planning potential impacts of climate change, to more specific city level or government level energy efficiency program design and things like that. I think the next scale of city and community planning will be a big one.
I love it. No, the whole virtualization and don't get me started on even loading that into virtual models and augmented reality, mixed reality. So it's exciting times and it's probably speeding up. So Diego, let's talk more about you. If I were to ask you the question, what's your specialty or gift? What do you think you're best at? Well, if you were to ask some colleagues, what would they say you're best at?
I think it's the fact that I try to think about all the levels or degrees of the problem or the challenge we're facing, right? So from the technical to what is the business value to, how we're going to implement this and does it make sense at the end of the day? I think I would argue it's a skill of, because perhaps of my experience trying to understand the technical part as well as the business side of it.
Yeah, I could tell early on, you mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast interview here, business. You want to know what can you do, business, buildings, and technology. And so you knew that early on. And, that's not for everybody. I have a lot of friends that are engineers. I have a lot of colleagues that I've hired that are engineers. And, you don't always get that cross-pollination between the business side of it and the engineering side of it. So it sounded like you knew that early on, and I'd say that is a gift. Let's talk about best practices. Do you have any routines or rituals that maybe help you stay on point? Good habits?
Yeah, I certainly have some things that I try to do every week and some every quarter to try to stay focused. One is, and I'm trying to remember which book actually said this, but I read it at one point at HBS and I stuck with it. And it's, blocking time in my calendar for planning early in the week, right? So my Monday mornings, I try to block an hour to really set the goals of the week and try to almost set goals for every day and prioritize what are the key activities that really contribute to that goal, whether it's, getting a proposal out or whether it's, creating a new offering or whether it's just achieving one next phase of the project. So I try to do that. And again, I use that to every day in the morning. I also try to dedicate the first, half an hour to really plan the day and make a long list of what are all the to-dos and try to highlight what of those to-dos actually match my priorities, the 3 big goals for the week to really, sometimes the whole point is try to avoid becoming reactive every day, right? Our agendas get packed and we start being, putting out fires instead of really chasing the things that will push us forward, whether it's at a project level or at a company level. So I think that is really good. And the other kind of routine that I've been doing it recently, just, last year, but is, every quarter, try to track your time. I spent 2 weeks where I really tried to log every hour of the week in what buckets they go. Are they, billable and not billable, strategic, not strategic, and try to summarize and take a look after those 2 weeks to really understand where are you spending your time. Because again, you tend to be too reactive. You had an agenda that you keep pushing, whether it's personal or professional, right? And at the end of the day, you think you're spending your time in one way, but when you look at the numbers afterwards, you realize that the time allocation is not what you thought it was. And there's a lot of room to improve. And it's not because you lack the time. It's because you are allocating poorly your time according to your goals.
I love it. And give us, unpack that a little bit for us, Diego. How do you track it? Do you have an app? Do you have a spreadsheet? Just in your head, you kind of reflect, you take the time and give yourself permission to stop and reflect. Like, how do you go back and quantify how you've actually spent your time?
So I do use an app. Actually, I used to do it like looking back at my calendar. I started perhaps over a year ago. really trying to dump everything in your iCal or your Outlook. And then after those 2 weeks, really looking, spending one Saturday counting all the hours and making, a nice pivot chart in Excel. But nowadays, last year I found a app that is called, I'm actually opening it because I can't remember the name, Clockify. And it's an easy app that you can use in your desktop and your phone, actually, and your iPhone. So it's very easy to start, stop, you can edit and so on. You create your priorities. Anyway, the idea of, some people say it's great if you do this all the time. Honestly, I think if you want to make it right, it takes too much time out of your productive day. But it's a good exercise to do for a week or 2 week period that you think is significant or representative of your normal last few weeks. And there's a lot of valuable insight to get out of that.
Well, thank you for sharing. That's what this is about, is you've given us a peek into your journey so far, some encouragement. Hey, what's around the corner? But here's those, I call them pro tips. A couple more questions here to get to know you more. I'm a fan of the bucket list. What are one or two things maybe on your bucket list?
Oh, well, so first, from a traveling point of view, of course, at this point, everybody loves traveling until pre-coronavirus, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've been trying to get to Denali Park in Alaska for so many years. Cool. And I was living in San Francisco for some time, and I never made it up to Alaska. So that's definitely one in my bucket list. The second in terms of travel as well is always Nepal, going to the Himalayas. Again, I don't have the time anymore to take the vacations you need, the time off you need to really make that long trip. But that's definitely in my bucket list. And the last one, I always wanted to read more, to have the time to kind of grab a book and try not to be reactive and learn something that you wanted, that you had a goal for every, a month or every couple months, read a book. And because of time, I kind of been switching to Audible.
Yeah, sure. I do too.
So now, at least in that bucket list, it's moving along because I've been able to get a lot of books done on the Audible.
I love Audible, and that's a good segue to my next question. But I've got to, since we're all learning how to work more remotely, maybe you can go to some of those beautiful places on the bucket list and do some remote work just as needed. But yeah, so books, reading, listening. I'm a big fan of Audible. Sometimes I'll just put it on 1.5 speed. I'm okay with that and really get through some good books. But is there a book or two you'd recommend?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny that you mentioned the 1.5 speed. We had this discussion with a friend. For some people, that routine or that, tips and secrets in life for a friend is actually doing that, is Audible, but at 1.5 is one of her tips around things. So anyway, you're very accurate on that one.
2 or 2.5, but 1.5 I'm okay with.
Yeah. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm fine with taking the pace and digesting the.
Do it for about 5 minutes. Don't do that. Don't judge the first 1 minute. About 5 minutes, and you let me know what you think. But yeah, books. What kind of books would you recommend? One or two books?
Yeah. So one that I really like was Hard Things About Hard Things of Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
There's a really good one. Horowitz is one of the partners of the VC fund Anderson and Horowitz. And he basically tells the journey when he was CEO of a company, Upsware, if I'm not mistaken, that later on got acquired by HP for 1.6 billion. But his whole journey on making the tough decisions, and it's really open, right? This is a guy that already is a billionaire. And so he has no trouble telling you how to deal with the tough decisions, what are the tips that work, what tips didn't work, how he deal with the board of directors or, managing up, managing down. Super interesting.
I actually have that on my Audible because, you love business, I love business, but I think he's a good storyteller in there about some crazy times they were going through in that book and at the time with that company. So it's definitely a good listen. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's also very digestible, right? It's a nice story, and the other one is perhaps more applicable in any field. It's Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss, and this guy was a lead hostage negotiator for the FBI, and it's one of those really fun books of negotiating. So there's the classical kind of MBA style, never how to get to yes and things like that, but kind of classical books in that field. Sure. But this guy in this one, it's really fun. It's really teaching you the negotiation techniques, but using real stories, right, from his time at the FBI negotiating, I think it's hostages in Panama or Colombia, I can't remember, but somewhere around Central America. And he really walks you through every step of the way, and it's a fun story.
Well, we need to share our book list because I like all the ones you're recommending. And so for those listening, if you haven't read these books, I'll put the links in the podcast show notes for sure. Diego, I've got a closing question. Two parts. The first one is there any advice you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
I think it's not that I didn't know it earlier, but I perhaps never got how important it is. And one is try to find a mentor. The amount of people that are really willing to mentor, younger people or more junior people, it's a lot. Don't be afraid to ask. People that have gone through the journey can really tell you what things work, what they don't work. And you'll be surprised when you do ask how many people are really willing to take the time out of their busy days to really give you advice. I think when you're honest and you don't ask for help on a project or something specific, but you really ask advice in life, it's incredible how people are open to give you support.
Great advice. And then finally, you've made a career out of sustainability, green buildings. Any words of encouragement for someone that's jumping into this movement right now?
Oh, I think, again, it perhaps is tied to the three trends that I mentioned earlier, but I think there's tons of opportunity in Greenbuild because you have basically two types of profiles, I think, in the industry. You have this really savvy, kind of like perhaps a little older school professional that comes from more classical architectural engineering point of view, but now they've been faced to integrate technology at the different levels from a building scale to city planning to performance to even analyzing wellness and so on. So I think there's a huge need of new talent in the industry. So for those that might be interested in jumping into green building, there's tons of opportunities. You're going to be very easy to get a few, digital skills on it. And it's going to be very easy to find professional opportunities if you're able to equip yourself with some key skills.
Yeah, no, that's some great encouragement. I think what I'm hearing is tremendous opportunity. This is a great industry and you just got to go after it. So thank you, lead fellow, Dr. Diego Ibarra from Santiago. Hey, man, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for the invitation. Really enjoyed it. And let's exchange that book list.
Let's do it. I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At GBES.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.